A billionaire has now been told he has only a few months left to live. Numb and hollow, he sits alone on a city sidewalk, staring at the ground as everyone rushes past him, when a small black girl in a worn, oversized coat suddenly stops, kneels right in front of him, and softly asks, "Sir, are you hungry?" Before he can respond, she breaks her bread in half, presses it into his trembling hand, and runs off into the crowd, leaving him frozen, because for the first time in his life, someone stopped to help him without wanting anything in return, and what he is about to discover about that child will bring him to tears. Before we continue, tell us what time it is and where you're watching from, subscribe and hype because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. The doctor's words hung in the air like smoke that wouldn't dissipate. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, Mr. Brennan. It's aggressive. With treatment, we're looking at 6 to 8 months. Without treatment, perhaps 4 to 5. Victor Brennan sat in the leather chair across from Dr. Patricia Hoffman's desk at Northwestern Memorial, his hands resting calmly on the armrests. 45 years old. Net worth estimated at $78 million, though most of that was tied up in property. Owner of 8 residential buildings across Chicago's South Side, plus 3 commercial properties downtown, liquid assets of around $12 million, and now apparently dying. Treatment options, he asked, his voice steady. Chemotherapy can slow the progression, manage symptoms. We'd start immediately. What's the quality of life like? During treatment, Dr. Hoffman hesitated. It's difficult. Nausea, fatigue, significant weakness. Many patients find it challenging. Victor nodded slowly. He'd spent 23 years building his empire, learning to assess risk versus reward. Buying himself 2 extra months of misery didn't seem like a good investment. "I'll think about it," he said. "Mr. Brennan, I strongly advise." I said I'll think about it. "Thank you, doctor." He left through the side exit, avoiding the main lobby. His driver waited at the front entrance, but Victor waved him off with a text message and started walking. He needed to think, to process, to figure out what came next. Except there wasn't much next, was there? 4 to 8 months, and then nothing. The April sun was setting as he walked through downtown Chicago, unnoticed in the early evening crowds. Without the tailored suit and entourage, he was just another middle-aged man in a dark coat, invisible among thousands. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent his entire adult life making himself visible, building bigger, climbing higher, winning harder. Now facing the end, he was just another anonymous body on a city sidewalk. He thought about calling Catherine, his ex-wife. Divorced 3 years now, though they'd been emotionally separated long before that. She'd taken their daughter Emma, and moved to Evanston, to a normal-sized house with a yard, away from the penthouse that had felt more like a museum than a home. Emma, 13 years old now. He saw her every other weekend, when his schedule allowed. Which meant he saw her about once a month really. She'd stopped asking him to come to her school events, stopped inviting him to her soccer games. She'd learned that Daddy was too busy, that work came first. Always work first. He should call Catherine, tell her about the cancer, make arrangements for Emma's future, trust funds, guardianship documents, all the practical details he was so good at handling. But not tonight. Tonight he just wanted to walk until he couldn't think anymore. The sun disappeared behind the buildings. Temperature dropped. Victor kept walking, driven by something he couldn't name. Not quite fear, not quite regret, something emptier than both. His phone buzzed. Marcus from the office probably, or Jennifer, his assistant, wondering where he'd gone. He silenced it without looking. Somewhere around Roosevelt Road, as evening deepened into night, dizziness hit him hard, his vision grayed at the edges. He'd forgotten to eat, forgotten to drink water, forgotten everything except the need to keep moving. He stumbled against a brick wall, then slid down to sit on the cold concrete sidewalk, his back against rough stone. People passed, hundreds of them. Their footsteps created a rhythm around him, hurried, purposeful, indifferent. A woman in running shoes stepped around him without breaking stride. A couple crossed to the other side of the street. A businessman glanced down, then quickly away. Nobody stopped. Victor sat there as darkness gathered completely, as the temperature continued to drop, and understood with perfect clarity that this was what dying looked like. Not dramatic or meaningful, just empty. Mister, are you okay? The voice was small, young. Victor opened his eyes, when had he closed them, and saw a little girl crouched beside him, 8 years old maybe, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing a threadbare pink jacket too thin for the April cold. She carried a canvas bag that looked heavy, bulging with shapes he couldn't quite make out. I'm fine, he managed. Just resting. You don't look fine, you look sick. She unzipped her bag and pulled out half a sandwich wrapped in a napkin. Here, you should eat something. Victor stared at the offering. Peanut butter and jelly on white bread. I can't take your food. It's okay. I already ate my half. Grandma always makes me bring extra in case I get hungry later, but I'm not hungry. She pushed it toward him. Please, you look really pale. Something in her earnestness broke through his fog. He took the sandwich. Thank you, she smiled, relieved, and sat down next to him on the cold sidewalk, like they were old friends. I'm Rosie. Victor, that's a strong name. Like victory. She swung her legs, her sneakers worn at the toes, barely touching the ground. My grandma says when people are hurting, the bravest thing they can do is just keep going, even when it's really, really hard. Victor looked at this child, this strange small person who'd stopped when hundreds of adults hadn't. Your grandma sounds wise. She is. She knows everything. Rosie pulled a small piece of paper from her jacket pocket and pressed it into his hand. Here, she gave me this when my mom left. Maybe it'll help you too. The paper was worn soft from being folded and unfolded many times. Written in careful cursive were the words, "Courage isn't the absence of pain, it's carrying the pain forward with grace." I have to go now, Rosie said, standing and hefting her heavy bag. Grandma gets worried if I'm late. But you should go home too, okay? It's too cold out here. She walked away before he could respond, disappearing into the evening crowd with her bag of mysterious burdens. Victor sat holding a child's sandwich and a worn piece of paper, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Not quite hope, but not quite emptiness either. He ate the sandwich slowly, tasting peanut butter and kindness, and thought about courage. Victor made it home eventually, to his penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan. 3,000 square feet of floor-to-ceiling windows, designer furniture, and absolute silence. He stood in the living room, still wearing his coat, looking at a space that had never felt less like a home. The next morning, he woke early out of habit, even though he had no idea what to do with a normal workday anymore. How did you manage an empire when you knew you'd be dead before the next annual report? He showered, dressed in casual clothes. When was the last time he'd worn jeans? And found himself thinking about the little girl, Rosie. Something about her stuck with him. The way she'd carried that heavy bag, the thinness of her jacket, the worn shoes, and those words. Courage isn't the absence of pain, it's carrying the pain forward with grace. He pulled out his phone and opened the map, tracing his route from yesterday. Roosevelt Road, near State Street. He'd been in that neighborhood dozens of times for business, but never really seen it. Never looked at the people, the buildings, the reality beyond property values and investment potential. He went back. In daylight, the neighborhood revealed itself differently. April sun illuminated details he'd missed in twilight, the boarded-up storefronts, the cracked sidewalks, the buildings wearing their age like badges of hard-won survival. And on nearly every corner, people were working, really working. Not the kind of work he did, in climate-controlled offices with catered lunches, the kind that left you bone-tired and still barely making rent. He walked the block systematically, looking for a little girl with a ponytail and a canvas bag. He found her 2 hours later, 3 blocks from where they'd met. She was pulling crushed aluminum cans from a dumpster behind a convenience store, carefully placing them in her bag. Victor's stomach twisted. This is what she'd been carrying. Not school supplies or toys. Recyclables worth pennies per pound. Rosie, she turned, startled, then broke into a smile. Victor, you look better. Did the sandwich help? It did, very much. He moved closer. Can I ask you something? How often do you collect cans? Every day after school, sometimes on weekends too. She said it matter-of-factly, without shame or complaint. Grandma says everyone has to contribute. She cleans offices at night, and I do this. We make a good team. Your grandma, where is she now? Sleeping. She works midnight to 6, so she needs to rest during the day. Rosie pulled out another can, examined it, added it to her bag. We live at 4842 South Indiana, Building D, 3rd floor. Do you know it? Victor's blood went cold. He knew it. He owned it. Brennan Properties had purchased that building 6 years ago as part of a portfolio acquisition, one of 47 units spread across a deteriorating 4-building complex in the South Indiana district. It was classified in his books as a low-maintenance investment, which meant they did the absolute minimum required by law to keep it operational while maximizing rental income. I know it, he said quietly. It's not very nice. The elevator's been broken for 2 years, so Grandma has to walk up 3 flights when she gets home from work, and sometimes the heat doesn't work right. But it's affordable, and Grandma says we have to be grateful for what we have. Grateful for a building he deliberately kept deteriorating because the neighborhood was transitional and he was waiting for property values to rise before investing in improvements. Rosie, I need to. He stopped. What did he need to do? Confess that he was the reason her grandmother climbed 3 flights of stairs on aching legs, that his profit margins depended on their hardship. You need to what? I need to meet your grandmother. Would that be okay? Rosie's face lit up. Really, Grandma loves meeting new people. She says everyone has a story worth hearing. She checked a small digital watch on her wrist, the kind you'd find at a discount store. She'll be awake in about an hour. You could come for lunch. We don't have much, but Grandma makes really good soup from whatever we have. I'd be honored. An hour later, Victor stood in front of 4842 South Indiana, seeing it through different eyes. The exterior brickwork was crumbling. The front door hung crooked on its hinges. Graffiti covered the mailboxes. And yes, taped to the elevator was a handwritten sign, out of order. He climbed to the 3rd floor. By the 2nd landing, his legs were shaking, whether from the cancer or shame he couldn't tell. Rosie knocked on apartment D12. Grandma, I brought a friend. The door opened to reveal a woman in her late 60s, thin but straight-backed, with silver hair pulled into a neat bun, and eyes that took in everything in a single glance. She wore a faded blue housedress and slippers, and despite the obvious poverty, her bearing was dignified. Grandma, this is Victor. He's the man I told you about, from yesterday. Dorothy Walsh. She extended her hand, and her grip was firm. Rosie said you were unwell. Are you feeling better? Yes, ma'am. Thanks to your granddaughter's kindness. Dorothy's eyes softened. Well, any friend of Rosie's is welcome here. Please come in. The apartment was spotless but sparse. A worn couch with carefully placed throws to hide the worst stains. A small dining table with mismatched chairs. Everything neat, everything clean, everything speaking of people who took pride in what little they had. But Victor also noticed the bucket in the corner, positioned under a water stain on the ceiling. The window cracked and covered with plastic. The radiator that clanked loudly but put out barely any heat. All problems that could be fixed, should have been fixed, would never be fixed under his current management policies. Rosie says you join us for lunch, Dorothy said, moving to the kitchen alcove. It's just vegetable soup, nothing fancy. That sounds perfect. As Dorothy heated the soup, Rosie showed Victor her collection of library books, fantasies about magical worlds where orphans became heroes. She read passages aloud, her voice animated, completely transported despite the cracked ceiling and broken radiator. They ate at the small table, and the soup was good, carrots and celery and potatoes stretched with skill into something nourishing. Dorothy asked questions about Victor with genuine interest, never prying but gently curious. He found himself answering honestly, though carefully. Yes, he worked in real estate. No, he wasn't married anymore. Yes, he had a daughter. How old? Dorothy asked. 13, Emma. He swallowed. I don't see her as much as I should. It's never too late, Dorothy said simply. Until it is. After lunch, as Rosie settled with her books, Dorothy walked Victor to the door. In the hallway, away from the child's hearing, she spoke quietly. I appreciate your kindness to Rosie. She's had a hard young life. Her mother, my daughter, struggled with addiction. She left Rosie with me 4 years ago, and we haven't heard from her since. Dorothy's voice was steady, but pain flickered beneath. I'm doing my best, but at my age, working nights, climbing these stairs, I won't lie, Mr. Victor, it's hard. Has the landlord been responsive to maintenance issues? Dorothy laughed, a short bitter sound. The landlord is a property company. Brennan Properties. I've called dozens of times about the elevator, the heat, the water damage. I file reports. Sometimes someone comes, looks around, says they'll add it to the list. Nothing ever gets fixed. I think they're waiting for us all to leave so they can tear it down and build something expensive. Victor felt physically ill. I'm sorry. Not your fault. You didn't create this system. She squeezed his arm gently. But thank you for caring. That alone is more than most people offer. He left the building and stood on the sidewalk, looking up at the crumbling facade. At every window, there were lives. People like Dorothy and Rosie, doing their best in conditions he'd created through deliberate neglect. 4 to 8 months to live. What was he going to do with that time? Victor spent 3 days in his penthouse, pacing and thinking. He pulled files on all his properties, 8 residential buildings, 2 in Bronzeville, 3 in South Shore, 2 in Englewood, and 1 mixed-use building in Hyde Park. The South Indiana complex, where Dorothy and Rosie lived, was part of his South Shore holdings, 47 units across 4 connected buildings, all in various states of disrepair. He reviewed maintenance budgets, repair logs, tenant complaints. The pattern was clear and damning. For 23 years, he'd optimized for profit, minimum upkeep, maximum rents, calculate exactly how little you could do while staying just barely on the legal side of habitability standards. It was business, smart business, his managers would say, his shareholders would agree, but he'd never looked at the faces behind the unit numbers, never met the people climbing broken stairs, shivering through winters with inadequate heat, calling helplessly about problems that got added to lists that never got shorter. He'd built an empire on their backs, and never even noticed the weight. On the 4th day, he called his head of property management, Marcus Duval. Marcus, I need comprehensive reports on all outstanding maintenance issues across our residential properties. Everything that's been deferred or delayed. I want it by tomorrow morning. Mr. Brennan, that's going to be a very long list. Are you sure you want tomorrow morning? The report arrived at 8 a.m., 117 pages, hundreds of unresolved issues across all 8 buildings. Broken elevators, inadequate heating systems, water damage, electrical problems, pest infestations, structural concerns, each item with a cost estimate and a notation, deferred per budget constraints. Budget constraints, that was the phrase he'd used. What it really meant was, not profitable enough to care. Victor made another call. Catherine, it's Victor, I need to see you. It's important. His ex-wife's voice was cautious. Is this about Emma's birthday next month? Because we already discussed, it's about me. I'm sick, Catherine. I need to tell you in person. Silence. Then how sick? In person. Please. They met at a coffee shop in Evanston, neutral territory. Catherine looked the same as she had 3 years ago, maybe a little more relaxed, a little happier. Leaving him had been good for her. He told her everything. The cancer, the prognosis, the choices ahead. Catherine's eyes filled with tears, though she tried to hide it. Oh Victor, I'm so sorry. Don't be. I've had a good run, made a lot of money, built a successful company. The words tasted hollow, but I need to ask you something. About Emma. Of course, anything. Does she hate me? Catherine's expression shifted from sorrow to something more complicated. She doesn't hate you, Victor, but she doesn't know you either. You've been absent, not physically, always, but emotionally. She learned a long time ago, not to expect you to show up. The truth landed like a punch. I want to change that, for whatever time I have left. Victor, you can't just. Catherine stopped, took a breath. She's 13. She's building her life without you. You can't swoop in now, because you're dying, and then leave her again. That's cruel. I know, but doing nothing is also cruel. I've already left her. I left her years ago while I was still alive. He leaned forward. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect understanding. But I need to try. I need her to know that at the end, I finally saw what mattered. Catherine studied him for a long moment. What happened to you? So he told her about Rosie, about Dorothy, about 4842 South Indiana, and the 117-page report of human suffering he dismissed as budget constraints. I've been a terrible person, Catherine. I've hurt people I never even met, and I've hurt the people I claim to love. I can't fix everything, but I have to try to fix something. Catherine wiped her eyes. Emma has a soccer game Saturday, 2 p.m. at the community fields. She'd never tell you this herself, but she'd be happy if you came, actually came. Not shown up for 5 minutes and then left for a phone call. I'll be there, 2 p.m. I'll clear my entire schedule. Don't make promises you can't keep, Victor. I won't. I only have a few months to keep any promises. That makes them easier to honor. Back at his penthouse, Victor made a decision. If he was going to understand what he'd built, what he'd done, he needed to see it from the inside. Not as a billionaire landlord reviewing reports, as someone who lived it. He called his assistant. Jennifer, I need you to do something unusual. I need documentation, a complete identity package, for someone named Victor Brooks. Driver's license, social security card, work history. Make him a manual laborer. Someone who'd be looking for janitorial or maintenance work. Sir, that sounds like, I know what it sounds like. I'm not doing anything illegal. I need this for personal reasons I can't explain right now. Can you handle it discreetly? Jennifer had been with him for 12 years. She knew when to ask questions and when to simply execute. I'll have it by Friday. The documents arrived as promised. Victor Brooks, 45 years old, spotty employment history, currently looking for work, generic enough to be forgettable. He grew out his stubble into a short beard, bought clothes from a thrift store, worn jeans, flannel shirts, a heavy jacket that had seen better years, studied himself in the mirror, and saw someone different, someone invisible. On Monday morning, Victor Brooks applied for a position with Brennan Properties Maintenance Department. The interview took place in a dingy basement office that smelled of mildew and industrial cleaner. The hiring manager, a tired-looking man named Tom Rivera, barely glanced at Victor's application. You got maintenance experience. Some. General labor, repairs, that kind of thing. Pays $13 an hour. No benefits first 90 days. You work when we tell you, where we tell you. Overtime isn't optional. We're understaffed, and we got a lot of buildings to cover. $13 an hour. Victor did the math instantly. Roughly $27,000 a year before taxes, assuming 40 hours a week. Which would be less, because Tom had just said overtime wasn't optional. But overtime pay would help, except at these companies. They had ways of keeping workers just below full-time status to avoid benefit requirements. He designed those policies himself. When can you start? Today. Tom raised an eyebrow. Eager. I like that. Report to Frank Morrison at the South Indiana Complex, Building D 7 a.m. tomorrow. You know where that is. I can find it. That evening, Victor sat in his penthouse and called Catherine again. Emma's game Saturday. Yes. I'll be there. I promise. Victor arrived at the South Indiana Complex at 6:45 a.m., dressed in his thrift store clothes, carrying a brown bag lunch he'd packed himself, sandwiches and an apple, the kind of meal Dorothy might pack, the kind he hadn't made in decades. Frank Morrison was waiting in what passed for a maintenance office, a converted storage room with a desk, filing cabinet, and walls covered in work orders. Frank was in his late 50s, broad-shouldered but stooped, with hands that spoke of 40 years of manual labor. You Brooks? Yes sir. Don't call me sir. I'm Frank. You ever done janitorial before?
Some. Frank grunted. Well, you'll learn fast or you won't last. We service the South Indiana Complex, 4 buildings, 47 units, 136 residents at last count. This is the worst maintained property in the Brennan portfolio. Corporate don't give a damn about this place. They're just milking it till they can tear it down. He pulled out a mop and bucket. You start with the lobby and hallways in Building D floors first, then walls if you got time. Building inspections coming up and they want it looking presentable. Not good, just presentable. Victor took the mop. It was heavier than he'd expected, the metal bucket awkward to maneuver. What about the elevator? I heard it's been broken for years. Frank's laugh was bitter. 2 years, 3 months, 11 days. I've filed 22 requests for repair. Keep getting told it's not in the budget. Easier to put up an out-of-order sign than fix the damn thing. Some of these residents are old, sick, they can barely make the stairs, but corporate don't care about that. Corporate, Victor Brennan, him. He spent the morning mopping. The work was monotonous, back-breaking in ways he hadn't anticipated. His shoulders ached, his hands blistered. By noon he'd only finished 2 floors and his shirt was soaked with sweat despite the cool April weather. Frank found him leaning against a wall catching his breath. "You okay?" "Just tired. First day's always hardest. Your body'll adjust." Frank sat down on the stairs beside him. "Joints creaking, or it won't, and you'll be like me, 58 years old and counting down to when my back finally gives out completely." "How long have you been doing this?" "This job, 4 years. But maintenance work, my whole life. Started helping my dad when I was 12. Learned plumbing, electrical, carpentry. I can fix damn near anything." He gestured at the building around them. "But they don't want me to fix things. They want me to make it look like things are fixed. Big difference. Why stay?" Frank's expression hardened. "You think I got options? I got a grandson, my daughter's boy, who's got leukemia. Treatment costs are bankrupting them even with insurance. I work 70 hours a week between this job and 2 others just to help with medical bills. I stay because I got to. Same reason everybody stays in a job that's grinding them down, because the alternative is worse." They ate lunch together. Frank's meal was similar to Victor's, simple food stretched to provide energy. Other maintenance workers filtered in and out. They all looked tired. They all had stories. Miguel, 29, working 3 jobs to support his parents and younger siblings. His father had been injured on a construction site. No workers' comp because he'd been hired under the table. Denise, 43, supporting 2 kids alone after her husband left. She worked the night shift here, day shift at a warehouse, and still couldn't quite make rent every month. Robert, 61, who should have retired but whose pension had been absorbed when his former company was acquired and restructured. He'd lost everything in the financial collapse years ago and was still rebuilding. These were his employees. People whose wages he'd fought to keep low, whose hours he'd carefully calibrated to avoid benefit requirements, whose complaints he'd dismissed as operational costs. In the afternoon, Frank took him to apartment D12, Dorothy's apartment. Water damage in the ceiling. Again. 3rd time in 2 years. Frank set down his toolbox. "It's from a pipe leak on the 4th floor that we keep patching instead of replacing. I told corporate it needs a full repair, but they just want me to patch it and paint over the stain." Dorothy answered the door, Rosie beside her. For a moment Dorothy's eyes met Victor's and lingered. Something flickered in her expression, recognition, perhaps, or suspicion. But she just nodded politely. "Mr. Morrison, thank you for coming. The leak's getting worse. Last week it rained into the bucket all night." "I know, Mrs. Walsh. I'm sorry. I'm going to do what I can today." Victor followed Frank up to the 4th floor, to an empty unit where pipes ran through the walls. Frank showed him the problem. A corroded section that had been patched with tape and sealant multiple times. "This whole section needs replacing. Maybe $2,000 in materials and labor. But corporate says just patch it. So I patch it, and 3 months later I'm back here again, and Mrs. Walsh has another ceiling stain." Frank's voice was thick with frustration. "You know what the worst part is? Mrs. Walsh thanks me every time. Thanks me for doing a job I know is worthless. And I smile and say you're welcome because what else can I do? Tell her the truth. That the company doesn't care if her ceiling falls in as long as she keeps paying rent." They patched the pipe again. Then they went back down to Dorothy's apartment and covered the water stain with fresh paint. It looked better, for now. "Thank you, Mr. Morrison," Dorothy said. "And thank you, Mr. Brooks, I'm so grateful." Her eyes held Victor's for a moment longer than necessary. She knew something. Maybe not the full truth, but something. Victor wanted to scream, to tear off his disguise and confess everything, to promise that this time he'd actually fix it properly. But he just nodded and followed Frank back to the maintenance office. That night, he could barely climb the stairs to his penthouse. Every muscle ached, his hands were raw. He stood in his marble bathroom, looking at his reflection, dirt-smudged, exhausted, transformed, and felt something break inside him. This was what he'd built. An empire where good people thanked him for band-aids on amputations. Where Frank Morrison worked himself to death because his grandson needed medicine. Where Dorothy Walsh climbed 3 flights of stairs on 69-year-old legs because fixing an elevator wasn't in the budget. His budget, his profit margins, his legacy. He thought about the 117-page report sitting in his study. All those deferred maintenance items. All those people suffering while he'd accumulated millions. 4 to 8 months to live. What was he going to do with that time? Victor continued his double life for 3 weeks.
By day he was Victor Brooks, maintenance worker, mopping floors and patching pipes and learning the reality of poverty from the inside. By evening, he was Victor Brennan, dying billionaire, reviewing financial reports and making plans. He went to Emma's soccer game that first Saturday, sat in the bleachers for the full 90 minutes, phone turned off, watching his daughter play with a skill and passion he'd never noticed before. She scored a goal in the second half and looked up at the stands, searching, found him. Her expression flickered with surprise, then joy, then careful neutrality, as if she was afraid to hope he'd still be there at the end. He stayed for the whole game, then waited while she talked with teammates, then walked with her and Catherine to the car. "You came," Emma said. Just those 2 words, but weighted with years of disappointment. "I did, and I'm sorry I didn't before. Are you going to keep coming?" Victor met his daughter's eyes, hazel, like his mother's, like his, and saw the question behind the question. "Are you going to leave me again?" "I'll be at every game I can make, Em. I promise." Catherine caught his eye over Emma's head, her expression skeptical but hopeful. At work, Victor absorbed everything. He learned that the other maintenance workers had noticed things, patterns, problems that could be fixed but never were. "They're running this place into the ground on purpose," Miguel said one afternoon, as they hauled trash bags to the dumpster. "My cousin works commercial real estate. He says this neighborhood's about to boom. Developers are circling. Brennan Properties is probably waiting for the right offer, then they'll sell and we'll all be evicted when the new owner tears it down." Victor said nothing, because Miguel was right. That had been the plan. Let the buildings deteriorate, keep costs low, wait for gentrification to raise land values, then sell at a massive profit. The residents were just temporary obstacles to a bigger payday. He'd approved that strategy himself, 4 years ago, in a conference room, with leather chairs and catered lunch. "You okay, Brooks?" Miguel asked. "You look sick." "I'm fine." But he wasn't. The cancer was there, a constant presence. Some days just a dull ache, other days, sharper pain that took his breath away. Fatigue that came in waves. He'd declined treatment, so this was the inevitable trajectory. His body slowly failing while he tried to understand what he'd done with his life. On his 22nd day as Victor Brooks, everything came apart. He was in the lobby of Building D, mopping near the mailboxes, when he heard shouting from the 3rd floor. Dropped the mop and ran upstairs, his body protesting, breath coming hard, and found Frank pounding on Dorothy's door. "Mrs. Walsh, can you hear me?" The door opened, water poured out, not dripping, pouring. The entire apartment was flooding. Dorothy stood in the doorway, water up to her ankles, her face stricken. Behind her, Rosie was crying, holding books above her head, trying to save them from the rising water. "The pipe broke again," Dorothy said, her voice shaking. "The whole section, the 4th floor, is flooding through my ceiling." Frank swore. "Brooks, help me shut off the water main. Mrs. Walsh, get Rosie out of there, now." The next 2 hours were chaos. Shutting off water meant the entire complex lost service. Residents poured into the hallways, angry, frightened. Frank and Victor waded into Dorothy's apartment, trying to salvage what they could. But the water had destroyed almost everything. Furniture, clothes, Rosie's books, all the small treasures that had made that apartment a home. Dorothy sat in the hallway, Rosie wrapped in her arms, both of them soaked and shivering. The little girl who'd given Victor half a sandwich was sobbing into her grandmother's shoulder. "It's okay, honey," Dorothy whispered, but her voice was hollow. "We'll figure it out." "My books," Rosie cried. "All my books are ruined." Victor stood watching, water dripping from his clothes, and something inside him snapped. Frank appeared beside him, exhausted and furious. I told corporate, 6 months ago that patch wouldn't hold. I begged them to replace that section. But it wasn't in the goddamn budget." "Where will they go?" Victor asked. "Dorothy and Rosie, shelter probably. Mrs. Walsh, don't have family, no money for a hotel. Red Cross might help, but..." Frank shook his head. "This is the 3rd major incident in this complex this year. Corporate's going to drag their feet on repairs, and half these units will be unlivable for weeks. And you know what? I bet they'll use it as an excuse to finally condemn the building." Victor looked at Dorothy, dignified Dorothy who worked nights and climbed stairs and raised her granddaughter with grace despite everything, sitting in a puddle of destruction, everything she owned destroyed by his negligence. He looked at Rosie, who'd shown him kindness when he was a stranger on the street, crying over ruined library books, and he was done pretending. Frank, I need to tell you something. My name isn't Victor Brooks, it's Victor Brennan. I own this building, I own Brennan Properties. Frank stared at him. Around them the hallway had gone silent. Residents who'd been talking, complaining, crying, all of them stopped. Dorothy's head came up slowly, her eyes met his, and in them, he saw not surprise but confirmation. She'd suspected, maybe from that first day he'd come to lunch, maybe from the moment he'd walked into her flooded apartment, she'd known something wasn't right. You're the one, Frank said, his voice dangerously quiet. You're the one who's been denying my repair requests. Yes, the one who's been milking this building for profit while people lived in squalor. Yes. Frank's fist connected with Victor's jaw before anyone could react. Victor went down hard, tasting blood. He didn't try to get up. He deserved this. Deserved worse. You son of a bitch. Frank stood over him, fists clenched. You came here playing dress up, pretending to be one of us, while you've been destroying people's lives for profit. I came here because I needed to understand what I'd done. Understand. Dorothy's voice cut through the chaos. She'd stood, placing Rosie gently aside, and now she walked toward him. Water dripped from her house dress. Her face was a mask of cold fury. You came here to understand, like we're some kind of sociological experiment. A project for a guilty billionaire. Victor got to his feet slowly. His jaw throbbed. You're right, I don't expect you to believe me, but I'm dying. Cancer. 4 to 8 months, and I finally realized I've spent my entire life building something cruel. I needed to see it, to really see it, so you could feel better about yourself before you die. Dorothy's voice shook. You could play poor for a few weeks, then go back to your mansion and congratulate yourself on your empathy. No, so I could fix it. Fix it? Frank's laugh was bitter. You can't fix this, Brennan. You can't undo years of people's suffering because you suddenly got a conscience. You're right, I can't undo it, but I can change what happens next. Victor looked around at the faces watching him, frightened, angry, betrayed. The pipe that broke, it should have been replaced months ago. Years ago, I know because I signed off on the budget that deferred the repair. The elevator that's been broken for 2 years, same thing. Every problem in this building, every problem in all my buildings, they're my fault. I chose profit over people, every single time. So what? Miguel called from the back. You going to fix things now? Make a big show of being generous with money you made off our backs. I'm going to try, but not for show, because it's right. And because, Victor's voice caught. He looked at Rosie who was watching him with wide frightened eyes. Because a little girl once gave me half her sandwich when I was at my lowest. And I need to be worthy of that kindness before I die. Silence. Rosie's face shifted from fear to something else, recognition maybe, or memory. Grandma, she said quietly, he's the man. The sick man from the street. Dorothy looked at her granddaughter, then back at Victor. Her expression was complex, anger and betrayal, yes, but also something else. Calculation maybe, or the beginning of understanding. What do you want from us? Forgiveness? No, I don't deserve forgiveness. I want. He took a breath. Mrs. Walsh, you and Rosie can't stay here tonight. The apartment's destroyed. Let me put you up in a hotel while repairs are made. A real hotel, a good one. And let me fix this building. Actually fix it. Everything that should have been done years ago. In exchange for what? Nothing. No exchange. You don't have to forgive me. You don't even have to speak to me again. But please, let me do this one thing right. Dorothy studied him for a long moment. The anger in her eyes hadn't diminished, but she was thinking. He could see her weighing options, calculating what was best for Rosie. You understand that trust isn't bought, she said finally. That you can't just throw money at years of exploitation and call it even. I do. She looked at Rosie, shivering and small, then back at him. Fine. We'll stay in your hotel. We'll let you fix the building. But not for you, Mr. Brennan. For these people, she gestured at the residents filling the hallway. They deserve better than what you've given them. And if you're actually serious about making amends, then you'll fix all of it. Not just what's visible, everything. I will, starting with Frank's pay, and everyone else you've been underpaying. Done. Frank stepped forward. You're really going to do this, or are you going to disappear back to your mansion and forget this ever happened? Victor met his eyes. I'm going to do this. And Frank, I'd like you to supervise. Whatever repairs you've wanted to make, whatever you've been asking for, make a list. Full replacement costs, no patches. We're going to fix these buildings right. And then what? You sell them to developers anyway. No, I'm taking them off the market. All 8 residential properties, they're going to be maintained properly from now on. Miguel spoke up. What about rent increases? You do all these repairs, we know what comes next. Rents go up, people get displaced anyway. Rents stay the same, I'll put it in writing. Lease protections for every resident. Victor pulled out his phone, his real phone, not the cheap burner he'd been carrying as Victor Brooks. Made a call to his lawyer. David, it's Victor. I need immediate emergency accommodation for residents of the South Indiana complex. Multiple units are flooded. I want everyone in decent hotels tonight. Families together, elderly residents in accessible rooms. Cost is irrelevant. And I need you to start drawing up new lease agreements with rent freezes and tenant protections. Yes, I know what it'll cost. Do it anyway. He hung up and looked at the faces around him, still skeptical, still angry, but something else too, a cautious, fragile hope. Buses will be here in an hour to take everyone to hotels, he said. Pack what you can salvage. Brennan Properties will provide an allowance for immediate necessities, clothes, toiletries, whatever you need. And tomorrow we start rebuilding. The next morning, Victor called an emergency meeting of his board of directors in his conference room. The same room where he'd approved the budget cuts, the deferred maintenance, the strategy of controlled neglect. He looked different now, beard grown out, face drawn from fatigue and pain, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt instead of a suit. His jaw was purple from Frank's punch. What the hell happened to you? Marcus Duval asked. I had an education. Victor placed the 117-page maintenance report on the table. This report outlines years of deliberate neglect. People suffering in buildings we own because we chose to prioritize profit over their basic dignity. That ends today. Victor, you can't be serious. Do you know what it would cost to address everything on that list? I don't care. Our shareholders. I'm the majority shareholder. And I say we fix everything. Starting with all 8 residential properties, prioritizing the South Indiana complex. His CFO Margaret Steele cleared her throat. Victor, we're looking at $30 to $40 million, minimum. Maybe more depending on code compliance issues we uncover. Our profit margins will disappear. The company's value will drop significantly. Good, it should drop. We've been extracting value from people who can't fight back. That was wrong. It was business, Marcus said. This is how property investment works. You buy underperforming assets, hold them while the market improves, then sell at a profit. It's not personal, but it is personal, to the people living there. To the grandmother who works nights and climbs 3 flights of stairs because we won't fix an elevator. To the maintenance workers we underpay and overwork. To the 8-year-old girl collecting cans to help make rent. Victor's voice was steady. I met them, lived beside them. And I can't pretend anymore that it's just businesses absolves us of basic humanity. You're letting emotion cloud your judgment, Margaret said. Victor, we're all sorry you're sick, but you can't burn down a company because you're having an existential crisis. I'm not burning it down, I'm redirecting it. We have approximately $12 million in liquid assets. That's enough to start comprehensive repairs. We'll finance the rest through restructuring, sell the commercial properties downtown, liquidate non-essential holdings. If we spend that money there won't be much left for, Marcus stopped, for my heirs. Victor finished. Is that what you were going to say? My daughter will inherit whatever's left, and I'd rather she inherit a company she can be proud of than a pile of money built on other people's suffering. The board members exchanged glances. Victor knew what they were thinking, that he'd lost his mind, that the cancer had affected his judgment. Maybe they were right. Here's what's going to happen, he said. We're establishing new company policies, living wage for all employees, $15 an hour minimum, with benefits starting day 1. Comprehensive maintenance standards, properties maintained to actual habitability, not legal minimum. Rent stabilization, no increases above inflation, with tenant protections written into every lease. And we're creating a foundation, the Emma Brennan Foundation, dedicated to housing advocacy and tenant rights. I'm seeding it with $20 million. Margaret actually gasped. $20 million?
Victor, that's more than a quarter of your net worth. Half of my liquid personal assets, yes. Consider it back payment for all the rent I've extracted without providing proper living conditions. The company can't absorb this, Marcus said. We'll be underwater within a year. Then we'll sell assets, commercial properties first. The downtown buildings will bring good money. We focus on what matters, providing decent places for people to live. If we have to scale down, we scale down, but we don't scale down our standards. This is insane. No, what was insane was what we were doing before. Victor stood, his body protesting. The cancer was always there now, a constant companion. You all have a choice: stay and help me build something better, or leave. I'll understand either way, but this is happening. The meeting dissolved into chaos. Marcus Duval resigned on the spot, calling the decision financial suicide. 2 other board members followed. Margaret stayed, though she made it clear she thought he was destroying decades of work. 32 years I've been building this company, Victor, and you're tearing it apart in an afternoon. I'm not tearing it apart, I'm finally building something worth having. He paused. Margaret, you have kids, right? 3. All grown now. When you see them, when they ask about your career, what do you tell them? That you help make a lot of money, or that you help people have decent places to live? Her face flushed. That's not fair. No, it's not. Nothing about this is fair, but we can choose what to do next. She left without answering, but she didn't resign. That afternoon, Victor went back to the South Indiana complex. Frank was there with a crew, not the usual overworked, underpaid maintenance team, but professional contractors. Victor had hired at double the normal rate to prioritize this job. We're starting with the water main replacement, Frank said, his tone still wary. Full renovation of the plumbing system in building D, then buildings A, B and C, then electrical, HVAC, and elevator repair. The South Indiana complex alone is going to take 4 to 5 months minimum. If we do it right, take as long as you need. And you're serious about the wages. $15 an hour, benefits included, retroactive to last month for everyone currently employed. I'll need your help implementing it across all properties. Frank studied him. Why should I believe you? Yesterday you were mopping floors and lying about who you were. You shouldn't believe me. You should watch what I do and judge me by that. Fair enough. Frank extended his hand. For what it's worth, I still want to punch you again. But maybe you're actually trying to do something right, so I'll help. For these residents, not for you. That's all I'm asking. Victor spent the rest of the week in motion, met with contractors for all 8 properties, signed contracts that made his lawyers wince, allocated funds that made Margaret call him twice daily to express her concerns. He visited each of his residential buildings, meeting with residents, hearing complaints, taking notes. Each visit was exhausting, physically because the cancer was progressing, emotionally because the stories were overwhelming. A single mother working 2 jobs who'd been terrified to report a gas leak because she feared eviction. An elderly man living without heat for 3 winters because repairs were pending. A young couple with a baby whose apartment had mold so bad their daughter developed asthma. All of them his responsibility. All of them suffering because of his priorities. He authorized every repair, every upgrade. Signed contracts totaling $38 million, nearly his entire net worth once the commercial property sold. At night he went home to his empty penthouse, and felt the cancer eating him from inside. Dr. Hoffman called regularly, urging him to reconsider treatment. Mr. Brennan, at this stage, we're looking at palliative care. We can manage your pain, extend your quality of life. I appreciate it, doctor, but I need to stay clear-headed. I have work to finish. Victor, you're not going to finish anything if you kill yourself pushing too hard. You're already showing signs of rapid progression, unexplained weight loss, increasing pain, fatigue. These are warnings. Maybe she was right, but he'd wasted 23 years building the wrong things. He didn't have time to be careful now.
On Saturday, 3 weeks after the flood, Victor went to Emma's soccer game. She scored twice. He cheered himself hoarse, then took her and Catherine for ice cream afterward, a ritual he'd missed hundreds of times before. "Dad," Emma asked, stirring her chocolate sundae, "are you okay? You look different, thinner."
I'm sick, sweetheart, I have cancer. Emma's spoon clattered against her bowl. Catherine reached for her hand. How sick? Emma whispered. Very sick, I'm not going to get better. Tears filled her eyes. How long? A few months, maybe less, maybe a bit more. The doctors aren't sure. Can't they treat it? Can't you? The treatment wouldn't change much, and I'd rather spend the time I have left feeling like myself spending it with you. Emma was crying openly now. Catherine too. Victor moved to sit beside his daughter, pulling her into a hug he should have given years ago. I'm so sorry, Em. I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry I chose work over you, over everything that mattered. I can't fix that, but for whatever time I have left I want to be your dad, really be your dad. She clung to him, sobbing. I don't want you to die. I know, I don't want to die either. But we can't control that. We can only control what we do with the time we have. They sat there in the ice cream shop holding each other while other customers tried not to stare. Catherine joined the embrace, and for a moment they were a family again. Not the family they'd been, that was gone, broken by his choices, but something new, something honest. What are you going to do? Catherine asked. For the time you have. So he told them, about Rosie and Dorothy, about the South Indiana complex and the empire he'd built on suffering, about his decision to spend everything he had left, money, time, energy, trying to do something right. I know it doesn't make up for anything, he said, it doesn't erase what I did or what I failed to do, but it's what I can offer. Emma pulled back, wiping her eyes. The little girl who gave you the sandwich, can I meet her? You want to? Yeah, she sounds brave. The next day Victor arranged for Catherine and Emma to visit the hotel where Dorothy and Rosie were staying. The hotel was nice, a mid-range business hotel with clean rooms and a breakfast buffet, but Dorothy still seemed uncomfortable, as if accepting help was an admission of defeat. But when she saw Emma, something in her expression softened. Mrs. Walsh, this is my daughter Emma. Emma, this is Mrs. Dorothy Walsh and her granddaughter Rosie. Rosie's eyes went wide. You're Emma. Your dad talks about you all the time. Emma blinked in surprise. Victor had been visiting regularly, updating Dorothy and Rosie on the repairs, and yes, talking about his daughter, about her soccer games, her school, the time he'd missed and was desperately trying to reclaim. He does. All the time, Dorothy confirmed. He showed us pictures. You scored 3 goals last week. 2, Emma said, glancing at Victor with an expression he couldn't quite read. Rosie grabbed Emma's hand. Do you want to see my new books? Mr. Brennan, I mean your dad replaced all my library books that got ruined, and he got me some extras too. The girls disappeared into the other room. Catherine sat down across from Dorothy, and the two women regarded each other with mutual assessment. Thank you for letting us visit, Catherine said. Your ex-husband can be very persuasive. Persistent, Catherine corrected with a slight smile. He's always been persistent. Dorothy's expression was guarded. Miss Brennan, Catherine, please. Catherine, I want you to understand something. I appreciate what Victor is doing, the repairs, the hotel, the money he's spending, but I don't trust him, and I won't, not for a long time. Rich men don't suddenly develop consciences without expecting something in return. I understand, and you're right to be cautious. Catherine looked toward the room where the girls' laughter echoed. But I've known Victor for 17 years, and I've never seen him like this. Whatever happened, whatever he learned, I think it's real. Time will tell. Over the next weeks, as April turned to May, an unexpected pattern developed. Victor would visit Dorothy and Rosie, checking on their needs, updating them on repairs, and increasingly Emma would come too. Then Catherine would join them. What started as brief visits became longer conversations, then shared meals. Rosie and Emma, despite their age difference, formed a bond. Emma helped Rosie with her reading. Rosie showed Emma how to find treasures in thrift stores, how to see value in what others discarded. They were completely different. Emma from comfortable suburbia, Rosie from hard poverty, but somehow they understood each other. Dorothy and Catherine's relationship was more complicated. Two women who'd lived very different lives, connected only by their love for their children and their complex feelings about Victor Brennan. I never knew, Catherine said one evening in late May when Victor was with the girls, about the buildings, the conditions. He never talked about the business. Men like him rarely do, Dorothy said. They compartmentalize. The profit is abstract. The people are just numbers. He's trying to change.
because he's dying. That's convenient timing. Maybe, but does the motivation matter if the result is good? Dorothy considered this. I suppose not, but forgiveness and acknowledgement aren't the same thing. I can acknowledge he's doing the right thing now while still holding him accountable for what he did before. Victor, listening from the other room, knew she was right. He was trying to buy redemption with money and good intentions, but redemption couldn't be bought. It could only be earned through sustained action, through proving that change was real. He might not live long enough to earn it. The cancer was progressing. Dr. Hoffman's predictions were proving accurate. The weight loss had accelerated. The pain was increasing despite medication. The fatigue was becoming debilitating. Some days were good. He could work, visit sites, spend time with Emma. Other days he could barely get out of bed. But he kept working, kept showing up at construction sites when he could, kept meeting with contractors, kept pushing the company toward better practices, and kept showing up for Emma. Every soccer game his body allowed, every school event he could attend, every ordinary Tuesday evening when she just needed help with homework. "Dad," Emma asked one night in early June, as he struggled through her algebra problems. His hands were shaking, the numbers blurred. "What happens after?" "After what, sweetheart?" "After you're gone. Where do Rosie and Mrs. Walsh go?" He'd been thinking about this. Dorothy and Rosie's apartment was being rebuilt, but it would take another 2 months at minimum. And even then, what happened to them? Dorothy was 69 years old, still working nights. How many more years could she sustain that? "I don't know," he admitted. "I want to help them, but Mrs. Walsh is very independent. She doesn't like charity. It's not charity if it's caring about someone." Out of the mouths of children. "You're right. Could they stay with us after?" Victor looked at his daughter. "With you and your mom. Or," Emma's voice got quieter, "I was thinking, you have that big apartment, and you're going to be too sick to live alone, right? Mom said hospice nurses can come to wherever you are. So what if everyone lived together? You and me and Mom, and Mrs. Walsh and Rosie, then nobody has to be alone." "Emma, that's a beautiful thought, but it's complicated." "Why?" He struggled to articulate the barriers, social, financial, emotional, but each reason he considered sounded hollow. Why couldn't they? He had a 3,000 square foot penthouse sitting mostly empty. Dorothy and Rosie needed a home. Catherine and Emma needed to be close during his final months. And he needed family. Real family, built not on blood or obligation but on choice and care. "Let me talk to your mom." And to Mrs. Walsh. The conversation with Catherine happened first, a few days later. "Victor, you can't just collect people to ease your guilt. That's not what this is, isn't it? You want a ready-made family for your deathbed. That's not fair to Dorothy or Rosie." "You're right. It's not fair, but Em's also right. Nobody should be alone. Not them, not me. If Dorothy says no, I'll respect that. But I have to ask." Catherine studied him for a long moment. "You're really dying, aren't you? I mean, I knew, but you've lost so much weight. You can barely walk without getting winded." "I know. How much time?" "Dr. Hoffman thinks maybe 3 or 4 months now. It's progressing faster than expected." Her eyes filled with tears. "Oh, Victor, I need to ask Dorothy, will you support me even if you think it's a bad idea?" She wiped her eyes. "I'll support you, for Emma's sake and because I think you're actually trying to do the right thing." Finally, Dorothy's response was immediate and firm. "Absolutely not." They were in her hotel room. It was mid-June now. Rosie was with Emma and Catherine at a movie. Just Victor and Dorothy, talking honestly. "We're not your redemption project, Victor. I know, you can't buy your way into heaven by taking in the poor woman and her granddaughter. I'm not trying to, but Dorothy, think practically. Your apartment won't be ready for another 2 months. After that you'll still be working nights, still climbing stairs. Well, actually, the elevator will be fixed, but still stretching every dollar. And I'm running out of time." He took a breath. "In a few months I won't be able to care for myself. Hospice nurses will come, but I don't want to die alone in that empty apartment. And I don't want Emma to watch me die somewhere sterile and cold. The penthouse is big enough for everyone. Catherine and Emma need to be close. You and Rosie need a place to stay. We could all help each other. You're asking me to watch you die. I'm asking you to let me die surrounded by people who matter. That seems like grace I don't deserve, but I'm asking anyway." Dorothy was quiet for a long time. When she spoke her voice was softer. What does Rosie think? I haven't asked her. I wanted to talk to you first. She loves Emma, and she's gotten attached to you, God help her. She talks about Mr. Victor's constantly, about how he keeps his promises, how he's fixing everything he broke. Dorothy's voice cracked. She's 8 years old and she's already lost so much. Her mother abandoned her. We've been one emergency away from homelessness for years. I don't want her to lose someone else. She will anyway, whether it's in 2 months or 4 months. But maybe it's better to have had someone who cared, than to never have had that at all. You sound like you're talking about yourself. Maybe I am. Dorothy studied his face, the gauntness, the pallor, the clear evidence of a man dying. Why do you care so much? Is it really just guilt? It started as guilt, but it's become more than that. You and Rosie, you showed me what I'd forgotten. That people matter more than profit. That kindness isn't weakness. That family is what you build, not what you're born into. He met her eyes. I've been a terrible person for a very long time. I can't undo that, but I can try to do better for whatever time I have left. And if I say yes, what are the terms? No terms. The penthouse is legally structured so that after I'm gone, it transfers to a trust for Emma. But the trust specifies that you and Rosie can live there as long as you want. No rent, all expenses covered. You're not tenants, you're family. Family. Dorothy said the word like she was testing its weight. We barely know each other. I know, but Emma and Rosie have become sisters. And you and Catherine, I see the way you talk. Like you understand something about sacrifice and resilience that most people don't. Maybe that's enough to start with. She was quiet again. Then I need to think about it, and talk to Rosie. Of course. 3 days later Dorothy called. We'll do it, but I have conditions. Name them. First, I keep working until my apartment is ready. I won't be a charity case. Agreed. Second, I pay rent. Not market rate. I can't afford that. But something, even if it's just a few hundred a month. Dorothy, non-negotiable. I pay my way. Victor sighed. Okay, 300 a month. But that's just going into a savings account for Rosie's future. Second, when Rosie and I move in, we're not your servants. We're not there to take care of you unless we choose to. Hospice handles medical care. Absolutely. Third and most important, if this doesn't work, if it's too hard or too strange or just wrong, we can leave. No guilt, no obligations. You set up alternate housing we can go to. I'll have David draw up papers today. A small house fully paid in your name, so you always have an exit. Dorothy's voice softened. You've really thought about this. I have very little time left to think about anything else. Then yes, we'll come. Not because you deserve it, Victor Brennan, but because Rosie deserves a sister, and a chance at something better, and because, she paused, because I think we all need each other. Even me. In late June they all moved into Victor's penthouse. Catherine and Emma in the guest wing, 2 bedrooms, shared bathroom, enough space for privacy. Dorothy and Rosie in another wing, similar layout, with a view of the lake that made Rosie gasp the first time she saw it. Victor in the master suite, with a hospital bed being delivered and hospice arrangements being made. It was strange at first, uncomfortable. 5 people from completely different worlds trying to form a family, but slowly they found their rhythm. Catherine cooked. Dorothy helped, teaching her recipes that stretched ingredients, showing her how to make abundance from simplicity. Emma and Rosie did homework together at the dining room table, the older girl patiently explaining concepts to the younger. Victor, when he had the energy, told stories about the business he'd built, the mistakes he'd made, the lessons he'd learned too late. Frank visited regularly, updating Victor on the progress of repairs. By July, the South Indiana complex was halfway through renovation. Buildings D and A were nearly complete. Buildings B and C were gutted and being rebuilt. It's going to be beautiful, Frank said one afternoon. Like these places were supposed to be 40 years ago before slumlords got hold of them. Victor smiled weakly. He was in the hospital bed now, too weak to get up most days. Thank you for doing this, Frank. I'm not doing it for you. But I respect what you did, admitting you were wrong, actually trying to fix it. That takes guts. The other buildings were progressing too. The Bronzeville properties, the South Shore locations, Inglewood, all of them getting comprehensive renovations. It would take until the end of the year to complete everything. maybe longer. Victor wouldn't live to see it finished, but it would happen. Margaret Steele visited in early August, bringing papers for him to sign. The Emma Brennan Foundation was operational with offices and staff. Already they were fighting illegal evictions, providing legal aid to tenants, pushing for housing reform at the city level. "You built something good," Margaret said. "I didn't think you could. I thought this was just guilt and ego, but it's real. Thank you for staying, for helping." "I stayed because my kids asked me what I was going to do. When I told them about the foundation, about what we were trying to build, I saw them look at me differently, with pride." She wiped her eyes. "That mattered more than I expected." They celebrated the 4th of July together. Fireworks over the lake, visible from the penthouse windows. Victor watched from his bed, Emma on one side, Rosie on the other, as colors exploded across the sky. "Are you scared, Dad?" Emma asked quietly. "Sometimes, but less than I thought I'd be." "Why?" "Because I'm not alone, and because I got to know you again. Really know you." He squeezed her hand. "That's more than I deserved." In August, Victor's condition deteriorated significantly. The cancer had spread, metastasized to his liver and bones. The pain was constant now, managed by medications that left him foggy but functional. The hospice nurses, Anna and David, came twice daily, professional and kind. "How long?" Catherine asked Anna one morning while Victor was sleeping. "Weeks now, maybe a month at most. His body is shutting down." Emma overheard. She'd been so brave, so strong, but this broke her. She ran to her room and Rosie followed without hesitation. Victor heard them through the thin walls. Emma crying, Rosie's quiet voice offering comfort, the kind of friend who just sits with your pain without trying to fix it. The girls came to him afterward, faces blotchy from crying. "Dad, we want to do something for you." "What's that, sweetheart?" "Christmas. We want to celebrate Christmas early. This weekend, before." Emma's voice failed. "Before I'm too weak to enjoy it." She nodded, tears flowing again. "I think that's a wonderful idea." They transformed the penthouse. Emma and Catherine went shopping for decorations, not the elegant, professional ones Victor usually hired designers to install, but bright, messy, wonderful things. Rosie and Dorothy made paper chains from construction paper. They strung lights everywhere, put up a tree, a real one that shed needles and smelled like winter, incongruous in the August heat. Victor watched from his hospital bed, which they'd moved to the living room so he could be part of everything. He was too weak to help, but that didn't matter. Just being there, seeing them create something together, was enough. They invited people. Frank came, bringing some of the maintenance crew. Miguel and his family, Denise and her kids, Robert. Tenants from the buildings, who'd heard what Victor was doing, who wanted to say thank you or goodbye, or both. On Saturday afternoon, the penthouse filled with people. Children ran through rooms that had been silent for years. Adults talked and laughed and shared food. It was chaotic and loud and absolutely perfect. Emma and Rosie made Victor a card. They'd worked on it together, decorating it with drawings of houses and hearts and families. Inside they'd written, "Dear Dad, Mr. Victor, thank you for showing us that it's never too late to do the right thing. Thank you for bringing us together. Thank you for being brave enough to change. We love you." Emma and Rosie. Victor held the card with shaking hands and cried, not from sadness, though there was that too, but from gratitude that in the end he'd found this, that Emma knew she was loved, that Rosie had a home, that Dorothy had support, that Catherine had been able to forgive him enough to be here. Frank approached his bedside. "We finished building, Dad, yesterday. Elevators running, plumbing is perfect, heat works like a dream. Mrs. Walsh's old apartment, it's beautiful now. Everything you should have done 10 years ago. How much longer on the others?" Frank smiled. 4 months, maybe 5. Everything will be done by Christmas. The real Christmas. I won't see it, no, but we will. And we'll remember it was you who made it happen. Frank's voice got thick. You built something that'll outlast you, something good. Victor closed his eyes. "Thank you, Frank, for helping, for forgiving me enough to help. I haven't forgiven you, but I respect what you did. That's something." As evening fell, they gathered around Victor's bed. Catherine read Was the Night Before Christmas, something she used to read to Emma when she was small. Rosie and Emma sat on either side of Victor, holding his hands. Dorothy stood behind them, one hand on each girl's shoulder. They sang carols, badly joyfully together. Victor could barely stay awake, but he fought to be present for every moment. This was his Christmas, his last time with the people he loved. He wanted to remember all of it. "Dad," Emma whispered, when the others had stepped away. "I need to tell you something." "What is it, sweetheart?" "I'm scared of you leaving. Of what happens after." "I'm scared too, really, really. But Emma, I'm also grateful, because I got this time with you. I got to see who you're becoming. This strong, kind, amazing person. And I got to tell you I'm sorry. And that I love you more than anything in this world. I love you too, Dad." They sat together in silence. Outside, Chicago sweltered in August heat. Inside, warmth and light and the sound of family. Victor Brennan died on September 28th, in the early hours of the morning. He'd been drifting in and out of consciousness for 3 days. Anna had warned them it was close. The breathing changes, the withdrawal, all the signs of a body letting go. They all stayed close. Catherine and Dorothy took turns sitting with him, making sure he wasn't alone. Emma and Rosie did their homework in his room, their quiet presence a comfort. At night they all slept nearby, Catherine in the chair beside his bed, Emma on the couch, Dorothy and Rosie in the next room. His last words, whispered so softly they almost didn't hear, "Thank you." The funeral was small. Victor had requested no grand memorial, no public spectacle, just a simple service with the people who'd known him at the end. Frank gave a eulogy. Victor Brennan spent most of his life building things, buildings, businesses, wealth. But in his final months he built something different. He built trust. He built community. He built a family from people who had nothing in common except the fact that they'd all been hurt by the same system, and they all chose to help a dying man find redemption. Maybe redemption is too big a word. Maybe he just found accountability. But that's a legacy worth having. After the service, Catherine, Dorothy, Emma and Rosie gathered in the penthouse, their home now, legally transferred to a trust that ensured they could stay as long as they needed. "What happens now?" Rosie asked, the question all of them had been avoiding. Dorothy pulled her close. "Now we live. We honor what Victor did by taking care of each other, by being the family he helped create." "But won't you have to work?" Emma asked. "At night, and Rosie will be alone again." "Actually," Catherine said slowly, "I've been thinking about that. This place is huge. I work from home most days, and Emma's in school, but afternoons and evenings, we're here. What if we just stayed together? Not because we have to, because we want to." Dorothy looked at her, surprised. "You'd want that?" "I think I would. Emma needs Rosie. Rosie needs Emma, and honestly, I think we all need each other." Victor saw that. Maybe we should trust his vision. They sat together in the living room, September sun streaming through the windows, and made a decision, not out of obligation or grief or guilt, but out of something Victor had finally learned in his last days, that family wasn't about blood or obligation. It was about who you chose to stand beside, who you chose to care for, who chose despite everything to care for you. The Emma Brennan Foundation continued its work. Margaret Steele became a fierce advocate for housing rights. Under her leadership, the foundation grew, fighting for the kind of reforms Victor should have championed decades earlier. Frank Morrison was promoted to Director of Property Management for Brennan Properties, now restructured as a benefit corporation. Focused on affordable housing, he implemented the standards he'd always wanted: living wages, comprehensive maintenance, tenant protections. The company's profits fell, but its impact grew. The 8 buildings Victor had neglected were transformed over the following months. By December, real Christmas, all of them were completed. Good places to live, safe places, homes where families thrived instead of merely survived. And in the penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, 4 people built a life together. Emma and Rosie grew up as sisters in all but blood. Dorothy retired from night shifts and spent her days reading to children at the library, sharing the wisdom she'd passed to her granddaughter. Catherine found purpose in managing the foundation's educational programs, using her business skills for something that mattered. They celebrated holidays together, supported each other through hard times, became the family Victor had assembled in his final desperate bid for meaning. Sometimes Emma would find her father's old business journals, filled with calculations and projections and the mathematics of profit. She'd flip through them, seeing the man he'd been: driven, ambitious, blind to everything except growth. Then she'd look around at the home they'd made, at the sister she'd found, at the grandmother who'd taught her grace, at the mother who'd shown her forgiveness, and she'd understand what her father had finally learned. The only empire worth building is the one where everyone has a home. On the wall of the living room, they hung the card Emma and Rosie had made for that final August Christmas. Next to it, Dorothy framed the worn piece of paper she'd once given to a dying stranger on a sidewalk. Courage isn't the absence of pain, it's carrying the pain forward with grace. Victor Brennan had carried his pain forward, had transformed it, in his final months, into something that resembled grace. It wasn't enough to erase what came before. Redemption doesn't work that way, but it was enough to build something new, something that would outlast him, something that made a small corner of the world a little more kind, and sometimes that's all any of us can hope for.